The air in the Red Rock County Sheriff's Office was thick with the scent of stale coffee and pine sol, a combination that clung to the wood-paneled walls like a permanent fixture. Nora clutched the strap of her leather satchel, her knuckles white but her face a mask of calm resolve. She had dressed carefully, practical boots, dark-wash jeans, and a crisp button-down shirt. She wanted to look capable, not corporate. A young deputy with a fresh face and a name tag that read Calloway looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," Nora said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm here to inquire about any open positions. I have a degree in criminology and experience in administrative management." Calloway blinked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Before he could answer, a heavy door creaked open, and a barrel-chested man with a drooping mustache and a tarnished silver star pinned to his shirt emerged. This was Sheriff Miller. His eyes scanned Nora from head to toe, a dismissive smirk forming on his lips. "A job?" Miller chuckled, a low rumble that made the other two deputies in the room snicker. He didn't address her directly, instead turning to Calloway. "Son, you tell this little lady that running a county jail and chasing down criminals, this ain't a job for women." The laughter that followed was quiet but sharp, each chuckle a small cut. Nora's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She held Sheriff Miller's gaze for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She didn't argue or raise her voice. She simply nodded slowly. "I see," she said, the words clipped and precise. "Thank you for your time." She turned and walked out, the sound of their condescending laughter following her until the heavy glass door swung shut behind her. Her composure held firm until she was inside her car. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she pulled out her phone. Her expression was no longer one of hurt, but of cold, hard determination. She pressed a single contact. "Dad," she said into the receiver, "the welcome was exactly as you predicted. We're clear to proceed." The stale coffee in Sheriff Miller's mug tasted particularly sweet this morning. He was still chuckling about the girl from yesterday. A criminology degree, he'd seen it all. Pulling into his designated spot, he slammed on the brakes. A sleek, black sedan was parked there. His spot. Annoyance flared. He parked crookedly beside it and stormed toward the building, barely noticing the new, crisply official sign by the door. Red Rock County Municipal Services, A. Sterling Corp. Division. Inside, the usual morning banter was replaced by a low, anxious hum. Deputy Evans, his face pale, intercepted him before he could reach his office. "Sheriff, you're wanted in your office." "Wanted? By who?" Miller grumbled, pushing past him. He shoved his office door open, a complaint already forming on his lips, and froze. She was sitting behind his desk. Nora, not in the simple jeans from yesterday, but in a tailored navy blue blazer, her hair pulled back professionally. She looked up from a file, her expression calm, her presence filling the room in a way that made him feel like an intruder. "Sheriff Miller," she said, her voice even. "Good morning. Please have a seat." He found his voice, a mix of outrage and disbelief. "What in the hell is this? Get out of my chair." "This isn't your chair anymore," she replied, not missing a beat. She pushed a document across the polished wood surface. "As of an hour ago, Sterling Corporation finalized its acquisition of Red Rock County. That includes this department. My name is Nora Sterling. I'm the new director of operations, your boss." Miller stared at the letterhead, his name and title below hers. The world tilted. The smug satisfaction he'd felt moments ago curdled into ice-cold dread. The girl he'd laughed out of his office yesterday now owned it. And him. Sheriff Miller walked out of his office like a man in a daze, his face pale under the fluorescent lights of the bullpen. The usual morning chatter died down as deputies noticed his stunned expression. "Everyone, briefing room." Now, he managed to choke out, his voice lacking its usual authority. Inside, the men shuffled, sensing something was wrong. Deputy Evans, leaning against the wall with a smirk, whispered to a colleague, "Boss looks like he's seen a ghost." Miller, hearing the comment, shot him a glare that was pure reflex but lacked its usual fire. "There's been a change in management," Miller began, the words tasting like ash. Sterling Corp has acquired the county's assets. Including this department, we have a new director of operations. Right on cue, Nora Sterling entered the room, her presence immediately commanding silence. She carried a tablet, and her expression was all business. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said, her tone cool and even. "My name is Nora Sterling. Effective immediately, all patrol units will undergo a systems check and equipment audit. All case files from the last 6 months are to be digitized by the end of the week, and new reporting protocols will be distributed this afternoon. Any questions?" The silence was thick with resentment. Evans finally broke it. "With all due respect, ma'am, we have a way of doing things here. We don't need some corporate suit telling us how to police Red Rock County." Nora met his gaze without flinching. "Your way of doing things has resulted in a 30% lower case clearance rate than the state average. That changes today." Before anyone could retort, the dispatch radio crackled to life. "All units, be advised of a possible 459 in progress at the 1200 block of Oak Street. Third call from that neighborhood this morning. Units responding to a 242 in progress at 112 Oak Haven Lane," the dispatcher's voice crackled. Evans and another deputy, Henderson, moved for the door, a Pavlovian response honed by years of instinct. "Let's roll." "Hold," Nora's voice cut through the room, sharp and clear. The deputies froze. "Pull up the addresses for the last 2 burglaries." Evans scoffed. "Ma'am, with all due respect, there's a live situation. We don't have time for a PowerPoint presentation." Nora ignored him, her eyes fixed on the large monitor she'd had installed. She plotted the 3 points on a satellite map of Red Rock. A clear line emerged. "They're all within 200 yards of the old storm drain access on Elm Street. It's a perfect escape route." She turned to the dispatcher. "Send a unit to the drain outlet behind the commercial plaza." Quietly, "Evans, you and Henderson proceed to Oak Haven, but maintain a perimeter. Do not approach the house until I give the word." Miller, caught between his deputy's glare and Nora's undeniable logic, hesitated for a second before nodding curtly. "You heard her, go!" On Oak Haven Lane, the quiet suburban street was tense. Evans sat in his patrol car, knuckles white on the steering wheel, fuming. "She's got us sitting here like ducks while he cleans the place out." Nora's voice came over his radio, calm as a lake. "Deputy Evans, status?" "Status is we're waiting on your orders, Director," he replied, the title dripping with sarcasm. Before Nora could respond, another voice broke in, urgent but controlled. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 at the Elm Street drain. I have a male subject exiting the culvert. Matches the description, carrying a duffel bag. He's clear of the residential area, moving to intercept." A heavy silence filled Evans' car. The suspect was caught, just as she'd predicted, without a chase, without a standoff. Over the radio, he heard the clean, professional arrest unfold. He looked at the quiet house, then instinctively back in the direction of the station. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her influence, a cold, calculating competence that had just completely outmaneuvered him. The briefing room was thick with a silence that felt heavier than any shouting match. The air, usually smelling of stale coffee and paperwork, now carried the sharp tang of resentment. Deputy Evans sat with his arms crossed, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor as if it held the answers he'd failed to find. Sheriff Miller leaned back in his chair, his expression a complicated mask of shock and begrudging respect. Nora stood at the head of the room, a digital map of the county projected behind her. "As you can see," she began, her voice calm and even, the 3 burglaries formed a clear geospatial pattern. Each occurred within 200 yards of an access point to the city's storm drain network. She used a laser pointer to trace a line connecting the crime scenes to the culvert where they'd made the arrest. The probability of the perpetrator using a vehicle diminished with each successive hit in the same area due to increased patrol visibility. The storm drains were the logical, high-speed, low-visibility escape route. A young deputy in the back, Ramirez, raised his hand. "Ma'am, so you just ran the odds?" he asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice that cut through the tension. Nora nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. Essentially, it's about shifting from a reactive to a predictive model. We stop chasing and start anticipating. Evans finally looked up, his jaw tight. It was a lucky guess. Luck is the residue of design, Deputy, Nora replied coolly, her gaze unwavering. And our design from now on will be based on data, not gut feelings. She turned back to Ramirez. Deputy Ramirez, I want you to start compiling data on recent vehicle thefts in the industrial park. We'll see if a similar pattern emerges. The assignment, a clear reward for his engagement, was a public dismissal of Evans's cynicism. Miller watched the exchange, saying nothing. The silent acknowledgement in his eyes was clear. His department had just been dragged into the 21st century, and he was powerless to stop it. The atmosphere in the small conference room was a stark contrast to the rest of the department. Charts and timelines covered a whiteboard, and the quiet hum of a computer was the only sound. Nora and Deputy Ramirez were deep into mapping crime hotspots from the past 5 years. The data shows a seasonal spike in domestic disputes during the summer, Ramirez noted, pointing at a graph. But the old incident reports are vague, almost like they didn't want to document it properly. Before Nora could respond, the door swung open. It was Sheriff Miller, his face grim. We've got a missing kid, a teenage girl, Maya Davis, second time this year. Evans thinks she's just run off again to her boyfriend's. Nora stood up. Pull up her file, Ramirez. Everything we have. The initial data was frustratingly thin. Maya had no social media, and her cell phone was off. It was a digital black hole. Evans sauntered by the open door, a smirk on his face. Tough to find a pattern when there's no data, huh, Director? Sometimes you just gotta know the streets. He was trying to get under her skin, and it was almost working. The pressure in the room felt immense. This wasn't a clean, predictable property crime. This was a child's life. He's wrong, Ramirez said quietly, his eyes fixed on the screen. Look at this. The boyfriend he mentioned, she broke up with him 2 months ago, according to her school counselor's notes. And her best friend told the responding officer that Maya was afraid of someone, but the officer dismissed it as teen drama. Nora felt a cold certainty crystallize in her gut. This wasn't a runaway. This was something else. Evans is working off old intel, she said, her voice sharp and clear. Ramirez, get that friend's address. Miller, I want 2 units to canvass Maya's neighborhood again, this time asking about a specific person, not a runaway. Evans, she called out, stepping into the hallway, you'll be coordinating the search grid from here, on my command. The air in the dispatch room crackled with a tension thicker than the humid Texas night. Nora stood before a large digital map of Big Bend Ranch State Park, the search grid illuminated in stark green lines. Deputy Ramirez was at her side, tracking radio chatter, his expression a mixture of anxiety and hope. Across the room, Evans leaned against a wall, arms crossed, his silence a heavy judgment. Anything from Alpha Team? Nora asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Negative, Director, Ramirez replied. They've cleared Sector 4. Nothing. Evans let out a short, derisive huff. Chasing ghosts in the desert based on a decade-old scribble. Prime police work. Before Nora could respond, the radio squawked to life, a voice cutting through the static. Command, this is Bravo Lead. We have something at the old Terlingua Creek overlook. A small campfire, recently extinguished, and a backpack. It matches the description of Maya Davis's. The room went silent. Ramirez's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Nora keyed the mic. All units converge on Bravo's position. Cautious approach. She looked directly at Evans, whose face was a mask of disbelief. The smug certainty had vanished, replaced by something unreadable. The next 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. Then the call came. Command, we have her. Subject is safe. A little dehydrated and scared, but she's okay. A wave of collective relief washed through the room. Ramirez let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, a wide grin spreading across his face. Nora nodded at him, a silent acknowledgement of his crucial work. She then turned her gaze back to Evans. He met her eyes for a long moment, the defiance finally gone. He gave a single, sharp nod, a concession more powerful than any apology, and walked out of the room. Sheriff Miller approached her quietly. "Good call, Director. Damn good call." Nora simply watched the map, where the flashing lights of her deputies were bringing a lost girl home. It was never about being the boss, it was about doing the job. And tonight, they had done it right.